Hey guys, it's Davin here at brewbits.com. Now, one of the questions I'm regularly asked is, why don't I ferment using a sealed bucket and an airlock? Well, I don't think it's necessary. Once you've actually got your wine or your liquor in your bucket and you've added your yeast, very, very quickly you will get it releasing carbon dioxide. And that's going to create a natural barrier. Loosely putting the lid on is going to protect anything getting into your liquid, so any dust and any other particles that are floating around, perhaps some flies falling in and things like that. So that's going to protect it from that. But it's still going to allow all of the carbon dioxide that the yeast are creating as it's eating the sugar to escape out. Buckets tend to not be very, very airtight. So if you did press this bucket down all the way, for the first time you use it, if it had an airlock in here, you might get an airtight seal. But you know what it's like. You've just done a stir and you go donk, donk, donk on the side with your spoon. Well, that creates these little tiny micro dents in the plastic, and that's going to allow any CO2 to escape through that. So I don't see that really it's necessary. What you're also going to potentially cause, if you do get an airtight seal and you've put too much water in your airlock, you could potentially create a stuck fermentation because there's too much pressure inside the bucket to actually push through the water and create yourself a stuck fermentation. Almost stuck on my own words there. So ideally, an airlock, after you've fermented in a bucket, should really be used on something like a demijohn. Come on in, James, come and have a look at this. So in this demijohn here, I've got an airlock in the top, because once the fermentation starts to slow down and not much CO2 is being created because all the yeast have used up pretty much all the sugar, then you need a smaller surface area at the top to try and prevent any infection. And this is where the airlock comes in. I don't know if you saw the bubble just bubbled up through then. So what's happening now is only a small amount of gas is being created, so we need this airlock to actually prevent any other forms of bacteria, flies or anything getting in. And on the top here we've got a little red cap. That just goes on, and that prevents any flies and dust getting down into our airlock and stopping our airlock from working. If we'd put our beer straight in, or our wine straight into a demijohn and fermented in there, it would be so vigorous that you actually risk potentially having all of this foam and froth come up here, get into your airlock, bung your airlock, and if you're really lucky, nothing will happen. Best case scenario, if something does happen, is that you come down in the morning, after hearing a big bang in the night, you find this just laid down on the floor. Worst case scenario, you come back down in the morning, this is still in the top of the demijohn, but the bottom of the demijohn is just smashed out, broken, gone all over the floor, and you've got lovely gorgeous wine smelling carpet. So I don't tend to use an airlock in my fermentation bucket for the initial part of the fermentation, and then I transfer it to either a demijohn or barrels, bottles or pressure barrels for either secondary fermentation of my beers and ciders, or for my wines, that's when I transfer them to the demijohns and use an airlock. So hopefully that gives you a bit of insight as to why I don't use an airlock in my buckets.